It was 593 BC. A priest sat in exile on the banks of a foreign river, the Chebar, in Babylon, and the sky opened. Not metaphorically. The heavens tore apart, and Ezekiel saw fire, wheels within wheels, living creatures made of light. And in the center of that supernatural storm, a voice. And that voice named names. Persia, a specific empire, a specific land, written down, preserved, sealed in a scroll, 2,500 years ago. We call that land Iran today. And here is what should stop you cold. The ancient name, Paras in Hebrew, appears in a coalition of nations described in Ezekiel chapter 38 as the enemies that will one day converge against Israel in a war unlike anything the world has ever seen. Iran, named before Iran was Iran. This is archaeology. This is ancient text. And this is 2026. And that ancient coalition is taking shape right now, in front of our eyes.
Before Persia was a villain in prophecy, it was a hero. And that is the part of this story that almost no one tells. In 539 BC, roughly 50 years after Ezekiel received his visions, a king rose to power who would become one of the most remarkable figures in the entire biblical narrative. His name was Cyrus. Cyrus II of Persia, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, conqueror of Babylon, and, astonishingly, a man God named by name before he was even born. Isaiah chapter 44 and 45, written 150 years before Cyrus lived, the prophet Isaiah recorded these words, and listen carefully. Who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure," even saying to Jerusalem, "You shall be built," and to the temple, "Your foundation shall be laid." His name, in a prophecy, a century and a half before he was born. Now, the skeptics will tell you this is coincidence or later interpolation. But here's where archaeology does something extraordinary. In 1879, a British excavation team working in what is now Iraq pulled something out of the ground at the ancient site of Sippar, a small clay cylinder, about the size of a football, the Cyrus Cylinder. This object, one of the most important archaeological finds in human history, is now housed in the British Museum in London. And written across it in Akkadian cuneiform, in Cyrus's own words, is a decree. A decree to free captive peoples, to allow them to return to their homelands, to rebuild their temples. The records suggest that among those freed were the Jewish exiles of Babylon. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children, ripped from their land, enslaved, humiliated for 70 years, set free by a Persian king who didn't even worship their God. Ezra chapter 1, verse 1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation. The text is explicit. God moved the heart of a pagan king to accomplish a divine purpose. That's the first layer of the Persian mystery.
a nation that was once God's instrument of restoration. But here is where the story pivots, sharply. And this is the part that most documentaries skip entirely. Something changed. Something spiritual. Something ancient. And to understand it, we have to go deeper than politics. Deeper than archaeology. We have to follow Daniel into the throne room of the invisible.
It is roughly 536 BC. Daniel, an old man now, one of the last survivors of the original Babylonian exile, is standing on the bank of the Tigris River. He has been fasting for 3 weeks, mourning, praying. And then a figure appears. Daniel chapter 10, verses 5 to 6. The description is almost terrifying in its specificity. The being speaks. "Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Stop. Read that again. The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted an angelic messenger for 21 days. The text identifies what scholars and theologians call a territorial spirit, a supernatural being with authority over an earthly kingdom. Not a human prince, not a political figure, a spiritual entity assigned to Persia. And that entity was powerful enough to block a heavenly messenger until the Archangel Michael came to assist. Now, here is the investigative question that every student of biblical prophecy must wrestle with. If there was a prince of Persia in the spiritual realm then, what is in that realm over that same geography today? The records suggest the spiritual architecture of a region does not simply vanish with a change of government or religion. The same land, the same geography, the same ancient spiritual designations. Which brings us to Ezekiel chapter 38 and the coalition that is forming right now. Ezekiel chapter 38 is one of the most debated, most studied, most controversial passages in the entire prophetic canon, and it has been misread for centuries. We need to approach it like investigators, not preachers. So let's look at the actual text. Verse 5, Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them. Right there, in the coalition. Paraz, Persia, listed alongside the nations that gather for this catastrophic end times war against Israel. Let's look at what the majority of credible biblical geographers and historians agree on. Magog, Meshech, and Tubal. Ancient territories in the region we now call Russia and Central Asia. Gomer and Beth Togarmah, ancient Anatolia, modern Turkey. Put, ancient Libya and North Africa. Cush, the ancient Horn of Africa. And Persia, Iran. The coalition that Ezekiel described 2,500 years ago maps with startling precision onto the geopolitical alliances we are watching form in 2026. We are not here to tell you this war begins tomorrow. The text itself gives us no date. But we are investigators, and investigators follow evidence. And the evidence, both ancient and contemporary,
suggests that the geographic, political, and spiritual conditions described in Ezekiel chapter 38 are more fully in place today than at any other point in recorded history. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 8. In future years, you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel. Written before the modern state of Israel existed, before the Holocaust, before 1948, before Aliyah, the mass immigration of Jewish people from over 100 nations back to their ancient homeland. But here is what the text makes unmistakably clear. The coalition does not succeed. Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 18 to 19. When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. 2,500 years ago, a priest in exile on a foreign riverbank recorded a vision of a war that hasn't happened yet, and its participants are the years today.
The archaeology speaks clearly about one thing. This region has always been a hinge point of empires. And every empire that placed itself against the covenant people of the biblical text eventually collapsed. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, where Daniel prayed while angels battled, Greece, Rome. Persia was the exception, the empire that aligned itself with the Jewish return and was blessed for it. And perhaps that is the deepest mystery in this entire story. Iran, the land that once set the captives free, has become, according to the prophetic text, one of the central antagonists of the final act. How does that happen? The records suggest the answer isn't political, it isn't economic, it is spiritual. Whoever or whatever rules the invisible architecture of a land will shape the decisions of the people on it. The same geography, different rulers, different outcomes. But here is where the investigation leads us to something remarkable. None of this is outside the scope of the prophetic plan. Ezekiel saw this. Daniel understood it. Isaiah named the actors before they were born. Which means, if the ancient texts are reliable, and the archaeological record has given us no reason to doubt their precision, then what we are watching in the geopolitics of 2026 is not chaos. It is a sequence. And that sequence has an author. We set out to investigate a name. Paris. Persia. What we found was a thread 2,500 years long, running from a weeping priest on the bank of the Chebar River, through the cuneiform inscription of a conqueror who set the captives free, through the battle of unseen princes in the heavenly places, through the coalition of nations converging in prophecy, and arriving without breaking in the headlines of 2026. The ancient records do not give us a timeline. They give us something harder to dismiss. They give us a pattern. And the pattern says this: the land of Persia has always been a proving ground for the question every empire eventually has to answer. Will you align with what is holy or oppose it? Cyrus answered yes. The prince of Persia answered no. And the nation now called Iran is, according to Ezekiel chapter 38, in the process of answering that question one final time. What the text says about the outcome, you already know. If you've stayed with us this far, you're exactly the person this channel was built for. Which empire's scroll do you want us to investigate next? Babylon, the empire that held the world captive and then vanished in a single night? Or Egypt, the civilization that enslaved a people for 400 years and was undone by 10 acts that defy all natural explanation? Tell us in the comments below, and if this investigation opens something in you, share it with someone who's asking the same questions you are. The scrolls don't belong to scholars. They belong to anyone willing to read them. We'll see you in the next scroll.